So, welcome to our one-on-one conversation with JT Ellison. JT is the New York Times bestselling and USA Today bestselling author of more than 30 critically acclaimed novels, including her standalone thrillers, A Very Bad Thing, It's One of Us, Her Dark Lies, Good Girls Lie, Tear Me Apart, Lie to Me, and No One Knows. The Lieutenant Taylor Jackson series, beginning with All the Pretty Girls, the Dr. Samantha Owen series, starting with A Deeper Darkness, and co-authored A Brit in the FBI series with the #1 New York Times bestselling author Catherine Coulter. JT is also an Emmy award-winning co-host of the television series A Word on Words, now in its 9th season. We have a full, robust bio of JT on the website that goes into a lot more things. So, but she's fabulous. I met JT, to give you a little background on our relationship. I met JT back in 2009 when it was called Twitter. 2009. I know. And I had written about a friend of mine who had passed of ALS, and JT was so sweet. She found somehow somebody sent her something that I wrote, and she was so moved. She sent me like 4 of her books, I think. Like, yeah,
Just to say thank you.
it was just like to just distract me from what we were going through, and it was like so lovely. And ever since then, I have been like her biggest fan, but not like misery kind of fan, but uh, a fan. So JT, first of all, I'm always fascinated. I know thriller is like a huge genre and people really, really love that. So what was it, that first book that I read of yours, Pretty Girls? What was it called?
All the pretty girls.
Yeah, Pretty Girls. When, if you haven't read it, I'm going to give you a little spoiler. The serial killer chops hands off of the people. And I'm like, okay, I want to know this woman. Like, what's in her head? Like, what drew you to that genre?
What's a nice girl like you doing, writing stuff like that? My mother says that to me all the time. It's really funny because I missed the forensics craze
Mm,
probably by about 5 years. When I was in graduate school, my husband and I, my then boyfriend, we were dating through school. And so we would get together for dates after school to study. And we would watch ER. This is Thursday
mm,
night, right? We would watch
yep.
ER. And then we would watch a show called The Profiler. And there
Mm.
was another one. Was it Millennium on that night too?
I don't know. I remember like Thursday nights were like
I mean,
Seinfeld, and like
it
this
was
was
like,
probably before the ER.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know.
Thursday nights was good TV.
It was good TV, and I was absolutely fascinated by the forensics in that show, The Profiler. And
Mm,
she was an FBI profiler. She was kind of psychic, right? She could look at the
mm-hmm.
scene and it would all pop into her head exactly how it all went down and everything, which is, you have to have an imagination if you're in,
Yeah.
crime anyway to try to do those things. But it was really interesting. And I've always loved crime fiction. I've read crime fiction my whole life. Um, but it wasn't until we moved to Nashville that
Mm,
I had been reading a lot of Tess Gerritsen and Tammy Hoag and Alex Kava and Lee Child and it was John Sanford actually that tipped me over into this. I really want to write a book like what he's doing, with a female lead. There weren't a ton of female leads, that we
mm.
had Kinsey Milhone and a few, but there weren't a lot of really big female leads. So I wanted to run a female homicide detective who is half cop, half rock star. She's the
Mm-hmm.
warrior goddess of Nashville. The book, All the Pretty Girls, I dreamt the entire plot, except for the hands. I told my mom the story and she was like, well, what if he left the hands like in other states? And I was like, oh, that's a great idea, Mom. So, that was all her. We're gonna blame
Oh
her.
my God, I love that. But
Yeah.
my mother just collects antiques. Like, she doesn't think about chopping hands off.
My mom's a big reader. My parents were big readers. That was
Yeah.
the rule was if I could reach the book on the bookshelf, I was allowed to read it. And happily, I was a
Ah,
very tall kid. I'm
you
5'11".
are very
Oh,
tall.
I'm really tall, and I was really tall, really young. So I was 5'8" in elementary school. They
So
actually
you
called
were getting like the top shelf
I could get,
books.
yeah, I could get all the way up. And, we had a hearth too. So if I could stand on the hearth, I really could get. So I read things that I probably shouldn't have at a very young age. I mean, I read Roots and the Thornbirds
Mm.
right around the same time when I think I was 8.
Oh, wow.
So, I was a little precocious reader. And I think any precocious reader turns into a writer eventually.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of us were all, you know, readers as kids. Like I
Oh,
know
yeah.
with my kids, like I would take them someplace and I'd be like, okay, if you want to get a book, you could always get a book. That toy, not so much. But if you want a book, I'll get you as many books as you want. Like, their favorite day was like the book fair at school.
Oh,
Like,
God, awesome. The book
right?
fair. We lived in the woods. We lived out in the woods in Colorado, and it was 40 minutes to the nearest town. And it was the library and I had a deal because you could only check out so many books at a time because I read so quickly.
Mm,
Allowed me to check out like 10 books at a time instead of 3 because I would go
yeah.
well, yeah, I was the nerd that was like, "What's the summer reading list?"
Oh
I
my
want to read,
God.
and it was done in a month. I love to read. I've always loved to read. It's
That's
You're right.
that's so cute. I think there's like such a great connection librarians can have with children, you
100%.
know? And that's I think sometimes I wonder like are kids today missing that because so many of them just go on Amazon and get a book or they go get a Kindle or and like I'd be curious we should have to do a poll one day and see like how many kids still go and check out books and
At the library. Yeah.
yeah, I know a lot of my adult friends do, but I don't know about the kids.
Oh no.
So
Especially with
somebody was
living over, they can get it digitally
I
now.
know.
So
I know, I know. And
they-
that's a whole thing. Like I look at your books before we're talking about digital, and I look at your books, there's so many physical books. And somebody had mentioned before they love how you color coded I mean, look at the Beauty and the Beast ladder. Like, oh my God, I always wanted one of those. But like when you consume a book, do you still mostly buy a book, physical book by hand, like to
I
hold in your
do
hand?
everything. It depends. So much of my reading, and I'm sure yours too, is reading advanced copies of
Mm-hmm.
and those generally come in digital form because they need them early and they haven't made
Yeah.
physical copies. It depends on depends on the book, depends on the author. Um, I like both. I have found, unfortunately, as I'm getting older, the tiny print is starting to become an issue. So the Kindle is really nice for that. And I also read so fast, so when I go on vacation or go on a trip, it's Kindle all the way because
Yeah.
I can't. I used to drag around 5 to 10 books on vacation. My husband's just like, I'm like, would you rather it be shoes? I mean, come on, dude.
I know.
Be shoes.
So, okay, so
Be
here's a
addiction.
question for you as an author. As a consumer, do you like audiobooks? And as an author, how much say do you have in your audiobooks?
I actually have say completely. I have narration approval, which is good because the Taylor book, the very first Taylor book. I'm in Nashville. Nashville doesn't have a heavy Southern accent. It's a very specific, there are just a few words that are really Southern, like buggy instead of shopping cart. And you
Oh,
make photographs, you get in the bed. You don't get into bed, you get in the,
mm,
just there's just some weird things. And they sent me they sent me the audio sample and I listened. Taylor, this is your mother. I'm like, we are not in Gone with the Wind. What are you doing? So I'm glad I do have narration approval. Um,
yes.
there are some narrators that I really, really enjoy. And I
Mm,
think that is, a lot of them have become stars in their own rights, like Julia Whalen,
yes.
Saskia Marlavard, Brittany Presley, Scott Brick.
Hmm.
There are audiobook narrators that I'll buy the audiobook because I'm a fan of their work and their voice over and acting skills as much as I
Hmm.
am of the books. Emily Henry is a really good example of that. Julia reads her books and I love them.
Mm.
I have to play them faster though. If you go at one point,
Oh, yeah.
it gets very pedantic. So
Hmm.
I turn them up a little faster so it feels more like conversation.
Yeah.
but I love them. I mean, I will consume as long as I can consume the book. I don't care what format I'm doing it in.
Yeah.
Whatever's most convenient. I mean, I've got books open on the Kindle. I've got books open in every room. I've got, stacks every it doesn't matter. It's whatever
But you're so right. The narrator makes such a big difference. Like it
you
completely pulls you out of the story if it's or if they're all the cadence is the same and if all the characters and some of them are just I'm amazed at some of them. I think it's fantastic. I mean, if you've
oh
got
yeah.
that skill set, it's a
Oh,
great thing for actors to be doing too, you know?
it's absolutely incredible.
Okay, so let's get back to the serial killer thing. Somebody has a question that Melissa says, I'm also a rabid writer of serial killers. In your opinion, will the genre ever die, pun intended, or get stale?
Have you noticed it's cyclical. So all subgenres are cyclical, right? Whether it's dragons and vampires, witches and werewolves, serial killers and cozy PIs and everything has its moment. And I've been in this for 20 years now, and I've seen the serial killer have a huge heyday, and I've seen it drop off. And then I've seen it come back. And I have two theories about it. One, we just don't have as many serial killers in the news. We have school shootings now instead. I think the kids
Yeah.
maybe that would have developed into serial killers are acting out much sooner. So the psychology,
That's an interesting take. Yeah.
yes, the psychology of that aside, again, trends, people have a tendency to jump on trends, and there's a trend there. But it also gets very wearing to write
Mm.
that kind of story, that kind of,
Hmm.
and I was about 4 books into it, which would have been five because I had one that I wrote before I got published. So I was 5 books into that themology of that killer mentality, and it got really dark for me. So I had to pull away from it. And I think a lot
Mm.
of people do, and that might also play into the cyclical nature of it because there was a while there that nobody wanted them, and now they're big and popular again.
I think killing people is always going to be popular.
I don't particularly like to kill people, which is
No, I
really
know.
difficult for me as a crime fiction writer. I don't like killing people.
But also too, I feel like with the thriller thing
I
in
mean,
the
I mean on the page. I don't mean
yeah,
in real life. That didn't sound good. I mean, in my fictional world, I don't like killing my characters. Let's
yes.
let's be more accurate.
But also too, it's like you've got to keep thinking of new and fresh ways to kill people. Like you can't just go up and shoot them in the head. Like you got to keep thinking of all these new, fresh, different ways.
Right. And there's nothing that you can think of that somebody else hasn't already done. uh,
Yeah.
which is awful. Yeah, there comes a time when it's like, okay, you get just as much impact for the reader and the story with the tension of blowing up a mall as you do having a string of
Mm.
murders set around the cell.
Hmm.
And it does, you don't have to have that particular kind of tension in a story, if you like me, start getting uncomfortable with it. But
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so let's hang on to this um thriller genre discussion for a second. Haley's saying that she's a huge fan of yours.
oh,
Um, yes, can you speak to the genre beats that are required and how you challenge yourself to fill them?
that's a good question because I like to play with the genre beats because I don't know if you've read John Truby, Anatomy of Genre.
Yes, we actually had him on our Reckless Creators podcast.
Oh,
I will
he's
link to that in the recording
yeah.
so you guys can listen
That
to it.
that book and his description of the beats of genre. I mean, they're so complete that there's really nothing I can add to it. It's so wonderfully done. For me, so there's two main kinds of stories in crime fiction. One is the thriller and one is the mystery. And we use 9/11 as the example. In the mystery, 9/11 happens, and you have to figure out who did it, why they did it, and catch the killer. In a thriller, we start maybe a week or a month before that. You find out that there is a plot afoot, and you have to stop it from happening. So those are the two sides of the crime fiction coin. And we're not going to go into suspense and gothic and all of those because those all have their own beats, their own important things. I have one overarching thing that I do. I ask a question on the first page and I answer the question on the last page.
Mm,
And as long as you're doing that, everything you're doing, it doesn't matter what the beats are. The best stories actually combine beats from multiple, you can have a romantic element, you can have a suspense element, you can have a mystery element, sci-fi element, supernatural. You combine all of those. There's only 7 plots, right? So those are the things that are really important to me. I also don't write in the usual 3 act structure because I think that's incredibly stifling to the story. I do probably 6 acts, maybe, certainly a 4 act structure where
hmm.
I've got turns at the 25, 50, 75. So that's where my important beats happen. So it's usually a reversal at that point. So whether it's um, the book that I'm writing, the first reversal happens actually way sooner than I was expecting. I'm like, what is going on here? So, you think something's going in one direction and then you have a reveal and it's like, oh, here's a whole nother part of the story. So those are the things that I try to do. But if you want the beats, the real, the professional beats, read
Hmm.
of genre because I learned so much reading that. I was like, oh, I do that. Oh, I didn't do that. Huh. Maybe that's why that book didn't sell as well.
But like, I can't even, all the books you've written, 30 books or, probably more since you
Yeah, I'm
updated
on
your bio
35.
last. 35. Yeah. So do you think about stuff like at the end of the chapter, like you want to make sure you've caught their attention so that they have to turn the page? I mean, what are some of the little tricks that you think about like on a chapter level?
I mean, I have shorter chapters. I try not to go over 2,000 words. When I first started, I was in a critique group and we had to bring 10 pages and I wanted to sandwich in as much story as I could. So that 10 pages would be a full chapter. And
Hmm.
you can get a lot into 10 pages of manuscript, right? Um, and you do that how many times, and then you've got an entire
Yeah.
book, right? I do like to leave people hanging. I don't worry so much about, oh, it's a huge reveal at the end of this chapter. Those are
Hmm.
the 25, 50, 75, and the end. Why I say 6 acts is because I always have an epilogue and something always happens in the epilogue that's very important and related to the story in some way. Um,
So how do you feel about there's all that discussion of prologue good, prologue bad, like do you how do you feel about that?
I think whatever the writer has put onto the page, you need to read because they've done it for a reason,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yes.
prologues are your frame, right? They're just your frame of what the story is going to be. They're setting the tone, they're setting often the setting itself.
Hmm.
You're getting the voice of the story. You're getting, what the stakes are if you're doing it right. Prologue shouldn't just be there was a trend for a while in crime fiction where the opening was a big, huge action sequence that had absolutely zero to do with the story, but
Hmm.
showed the characters as heroic. So you got to see the
Oh,
character in situ in their heroic action chasing down the bad guys, but had absolutely nothing to do with the book. And I think that's kind of maybe where the whole, oh God, there's a prologue because
yeah.
for me, if I've got a prologue, it's the frame of the story. It's
Hmm.
it's very much, our once upon a time part of the story is
Yeah.
what prologues are, and my epilogues are, and they lived happily ever after, right? Those are the
Hmm.
brackets, the parentheses of the story.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I love the suggestion. If they wrote it, read it. Like it makes sense.
Yeah,
And I
why
don't know
else
why
is it
people
there?
I know. I don't know why people get so butthurt about them. Like
Oh no.
I've
It's like,
heard some
really?
yes, people just get like I hate they're very opinionated about it. I don't know if the people listening in tonight care one way or the other, but I always found it fascinating. Like, why do you care? Like if
Yeah,
it's there, I'm gonna read it,
yeah. It's
Um
It's like,
Yeah.
do them the honor of not butt hurt. I just saw that pop up after the, I mean, do them a courtesy of reading what's there and making your decision after the fact.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so Beth says your bio mentioned you won the Silver Falcon Award. Was that with Killer Nashville? And do you still attend? It's my favorite writing conference.
Hi. The Silver Falchion is actually, that award was for a book in my pen names series. I write fantasy under a pen name. And the first book in the series won the Silver Falchion, and I was there at Killer Nashville. I don't go a lot because it's on my anniversary almost every
Oh,
year. And I'm like, okay, anniversary with husband, honeymoon, we're on our 30th honeymoon this year, so that's kind of fun.
mm,
Do that or go to a writers conference. And my husband in a honeymoon is going to win every time. They moved it that year. They had actually moved it, and I was able to go, and I was guest of honor and won under the pen name, which they didn't know it was my pen name.
oh my gosh, that's so funny.
I actually had tickets under the pen name because, if you're a nominee, they give you a ticket to the dinner. And they couldn't find JT anywhere, and they were like, "I know you probably paid." I'm like, "Of course I did. Of course what are you talking about?" It was really funny. But it is a really fantastic, small, intimate writing conference for anybody who wants to get into crime fiction and is looking for something more instructional uh,
Mm,
than Thriller Fest. Thriller Fest is definitely the big dogs, getting interviewed and doing fun things like that.
yeah.
Killer Nashville is a little more hands-on and nitty-gritty, I think.
So there's two things I want to touch on is like other writing conferences you love, but also pen name. Like the decision to then go write, was it because it was a different genre that you wanted to use a different name?
Yeah. Yeah, I was encouraged. Nobody wanted me to do it. I got a lot of stay in your lane, JT. You finally penetrated the crime fiction market. Why would you want to write fantasy? It's like because I penetrated the crime fiction market and now I want to write fantasy. Why else would I want to do this? It's you if you don't challenge yourself as a writer to try
Mm,
different things, then you get stale. And I was feeling stale. I was feeling like I was doing the same stuff over and
hmm
over, and I never want to write the same books twice. I've
hmm
always wanted to write fantasy. It was actually a thriller series that was going to be a little lighter, kind of a funny homeland, which that pitch didn't quite work. But you make funny homeland into a CIA librarian who discovers there's magic, and it works,
mm,
right?
mm.
Again, with kind of, genre beats. You can change something by switching the genre of it and turn it into something completely different.
I heard somebody say today that they try to live their life every day, 30% nervous because I mean, they're 30% of their day is spent doing something outside of their comfort zone.
Mm,
And
I
I
like
thought
it.
that was a high percentage. That would probably freak me out.
I don't
But
know.
I
Anytime I leave my house, I'm like, okay, I'm not a fan.
every time I'm out of my pajamas,
If I
but
have to what? If I have to take a shower to leave the house, I'm like, nope,
yeah,
nope, I'm in my 30%.
I'm with you on that. Definitely. But the writing conferences, so you like Thriller Fest is a big one for that genre, like in New York City. I'm also with you on I like it when the conferences kind of switch up when they're not on the same weekend every year because it's there's going to be a certain group of people who that's a problem for.
Sure, always.
Um, but which one, like, if you could only go to like three conferences in a year, which ones would they be?
Thriller Fest, BoucherCon, and um, Left Coast Crime is really fun.
Yes.
Left
I have
Coast.
not gone, but I Matt has gone and he really loves it.
Yeah,
Smaller,
that's
more
another
intimate.
smaller, intimate, more Killer Nashville. Killer Nashville is a writing conference. Left
Hmm
Coast Crime is a writers conference. But it is, that's where fans go. There are not a lot of fans that go to Killer Nashville. It's more people wanting to learn how to write.
Yeah.
Uh, but Left Coast Crime, yeah, exactly. It's very chill. It's very chill, and it's, always in the West Coast somewhere from, what is it, Colorado and Idaho
Hmm.
West, and you know, it's fun. It's a fun one.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of those smaller, more intimate conferences. I think they're just charming and very inspiring. And there's just this warm and fuzzy feel that you get out of that. So Stephanie says, what are your best tips for researching crime elements, such as forensics and inner workings of law enforcement? And for writers who are newbies to this genre, where do we begin?
So I'll tell you how I did it. When I decided I wanted to write this story, I called Metro Nashville. I asked for the homicide office, and I spoke to a homicide detective. I maybe miscalculated in my enthusiasm. I asked him if Nashville had ever had a serial killer, and I was really excited because I was very nervous. And he was like, huh. And he talked to me for about a half an hour, I think maybe just making sure I wasn't trying out for the job. And he ended up saying, why don't you come and do a ride along? So I ended up doing 8 ride-alongs. I spent a lot of time with homicide. I did overnight patrol. I did autopsies. I'm a very, very big believer in hands-on. When I was doing the FBI series, I went to the FBI offices in New York and I interviewed people in Quantico. We went to Quantico. They wouldn't let me in, but we went to Quantico. So at least I knew what it looked like driving that
Mhm.
road to go in there because something happened on that road in my story. So, I'm a big believer if you can do firsthand research, do it. Primary source is always best. And your local police departments put on Citizens Police Academy. FBI has a Citizens FBI Academy. It is definitely it's a completely accessible world. Um, and make friends with somebody who has contacts. Now Thriller Fest provides a lot of this. They
Mhm.
have an FBI day, so they've got FBI agents there that you can interview, and they do a symposium, and they have people in with their weapons. There's a couple of weapons conferences where you can go and learn, because you never want to screw up a gun. uh,
Mm-mm.
you will be dragged over the coals and not taken seriously ever again. um, if you screw up a gun. So it is definitely accessible, I think.
There was a guy I met, his name is escaping me. I met him at Thriller Fest and he was teaching a session on guns so that people wouldn't mess up. Yeah, I mean it's that
And
kind of
then
stuff I feel
cultivate
like.
cultivate those contacts.
Hmm.
For a very long time, the homicide detective read all of my books. Now, when I
Oh
stopped
wow.
writing those particular kinds of books, I moved on to something that I didn't need. But I have a death investigator who reads all of my books to make sure I get the death stuff right. And,
Yeah.
I have a poison that it's presenting correctly in autopsy. And, once you
And
cultivate
if
those people, then it's really great.
and if there's a poison that's only made in Italy, you'll have to just fly to Italy and just
No,
torture yourself.
it's a hard life, but I do have a tendency to set things in other countries and have to go and make sure that, it's really interesting. One of the things that you got to use all your senses when you write, obviously,
Mhm.
and when you're doing research and imparting that to the reader, you have to hit all of those senses. And there's one thing that you just cannot get without being there, and that's what it smells like.
Mm.
You can hear it, but you can't smell it. So when I do write a setting that I can't go, I use Anthony Bourdain's show because he has such an evocative description of what the smell of the area is
Ooh.
that you can really. I had to do something in Malaysia, and I obviously have never been there, and I used his episodes where he had gone to the various places that I needed and used the scents that he talked about. I mean, smell is everything. Smell makes
It
what
is.
taste
It
taste.
is. People are saying very smart. You are very smart. You are very smart. That's why we have you here.
I
And
just have
Kath
I've just got a few shortcuts, that's all.
and Catherine asked about the which I think you answered about the, do you have any people you who advise you on the accuracy of the law enforcement
Yes.
procedures. Yeah.
Yes. So I've got different people for different aspects of it. I've got a virologist. I did a virus book. As a matter of fact, when COVID was just kicking off, I wrote him, and I had been seeing some stuff from some other people that I had met and talked to coming out of China, and I was flipping out, and he was like, "Tell me what you think is going to happen." And I wrote him up a whole thing, and he wrote back and goes,
Mm,
"Wow, that is why they pay you the big bucks. That's not going to happen. That's not what we're looking at." 3 weeks later, he wrote me back and he said, "Every single thing that you are saying might happen has happened, shut down." That was in
wow.
that was in January before we got
Yeah.
going. So, they knew this was coming early. So
Yeah.
it's really handy. You might be able to avoid a pandemic and continue having toilet paper when all of your friends don't.
You're like, okay, before we shut down, I better go get some toilet paper.
Oh my God, we still have industrial boxes of toilet paper in the garage.
Did you ever see that episode of Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm when do you ever watch that show? When they found their friend had like all this had been hoarding toilet paper. Like it was a whole
I am
thing.
that friend.
There you go.
I'm hoarding dried diced chicken and egg powder right now.
Oh, what are you going to do with the egg powder?
Well, we're having a massive egg
Oh,
shortage.
that's right.
The
The egg
eggs.
yes. Yeah. Oh,
They've
egg
killed all
powder.
killed all the chickens. We have.
Yeah. I didn't even think about egg
I
powder.
live I live on chicken and eggs, so it's like this is a
Oh,
problem for me.
that would be a problem for sure. Okay, so Jay
Our
asks,
sorry.
no. So Jay asks, how do you balance writing and reading? Do you set aside like a certain amount of time during the day? Like, how do you give us a little bit of your beyond, like taking that question beyond, a little bit about your process of what the day in the life of JT Ellison looks like.
It depends on what I'm reading and how much I love it. If it's for blurb, if it's something I'm doing a blurb and it's due in a few days, I'll spend the mornings reading in that scenario. Sometimes I'll read in the morning just when I want to be inspired or really want to, just get my mind into a creative space. I'm not a morning person. I wish to God
Mm,
I was the kind that could get up at 5 a.m. and work. I am not. I am not functional until
can't do
well
that
after
either.
9 o'clock. I'm a night owl. I just don't. My big creative time is from about 1 to 4. I
Hmm.
can start working at about 10. If I can get 1,000 words before noon, we're in business, right? It's going to be a good day. If I have any kind of event during the day, I can't write. It just shoots me. I
Mm,
can't shoot myself in the foot. Like if I've got a physical therapy appointment or something, it's really hard to come home and function
yeah.
work. So I try not to do that. I try to section out my day so I can do it on Mondays and Fridays, things outside
Hmm.
of the house. That gives me Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of just full bore, deep work, critical, infrastructure kind of time for the book. And I like writing on weekends a lot because, there's no need to check email. Nobody's looking for
Yeah.
me, nobody needs anything. Um, so yeah, I've always been kind of a 1 to 4 writer.
Mm,
And that works. Now, if I'm on deadline, I'm doing 2 a days. I'm writing, 9 to 12 and then 1 to 4.
yeah.
But that's, you can get a lot done in 4 hours. You can get a
Oh
lot,
my gosh,
a
yeah.
lot of
But
creative.
like on a day like when you're doing those double duty days, I mean, your brain has to be so tired, like just at the end, because it's like there's I don't know how sometimes I'll be like writing and I'll be like, how come I'm so tired? Like later on in the day. It's like, well, because I did a lot of thinking. Like there do
Yeah.
you ever feel
No,
like that?
I
Like,
mean, yeah, that brain energy is that's a real drain on what you're doing. I have to force myself to stop though. I mean, if I'm going and it's
yeah.
like, oh, you're at 2,500, 500 more words. Hey, you hit
Hmm.
3,000. Can you go for 4? I'm like Bob Barker, whammy. Let's do it. Let's do some more.
I remember you showing me Scrivener program.
Mhm.
I took a train down to New York just so JT could
Just
give
so
me a
we could do the
personal.
Scrivener tutorial.
That's right. And I remember you telling me that you loved that little thing where you could put a set a goal of how many words you want to write that day. And that
Yeah.
whole goal tracking thing was like what made that program really shine for you. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Every time I open that, I think of you.
Very Pavlovian. I'm very, there is very much a, here is my time. I usually put on an ASMR room too, just to
Mm,
tell my brain, oh, hey, it's time. It's time to
yeah.
stop looking at stuff. I've been on a social media sabbatical, which has been absolutely wonderful and healing for
Yeah.
for the dopamine, even though I've been on Twitter a lot, but that's fine. Twitter has turned into news for me. I'm not using it for
Right.
marketing or anything. It's just for news. So I haven't done anything. I've got a Substack and I've been on my Substack and
Mm-hmm.
it's been very healing. I feel like the lesions are starting to heal from the
Mm.
algorithm constantly doing that. Um,
And it's really a challenge. I think a lot of writers have that struggle of, what if I don't have a platform? What if I don't have a lot of followers? Like, how do I, and now there are so many more social media platforms because people are fleeing X and people are doing, then it's like, oh my God, I only have so much time. Like, I just found you on Blue Sky today. Like, and it was like, oh, okay,
yeah,
she's here
I've
too.
got it. No,
It's
I'm
like,
not there. I'm not there. I
right,
just, I have a branded name, Thriller
right,
Chick. So
right.
anytime there's something that pops up that looks like it's going to be the shiny new thing, I just go and claim Thriller Chick. I have an RSS feed that
Mm-hmm.
out. I use Deliberate. So
Mm-hmm.
my RSS feed from my blog feeds out to Threads, to
Oh, that's
Instagram,
awesome.
to Blue Sky, to all of that. So I'm consolidated in one place, and that's just shooting out to the different, because yeah, it's gotten, and that's probably not a terrible thing. I think we're going to look back on social media like smoking.
It's going to, history is not going to be kind when we look back on this moment. That's a whole other
That's a whole different,
whole other
that's
supposing. But
for
it
another
is,
Zoom.
I think my point of bringing it up is to just kind of say to people, I do the same thing. New one comes up, I grab my handle, and then like I set up a Blue Sky over a year ago, and then I didn't really go back to it till recently. Grab your handle just so you have it, walk away, because 99% of the time it's not going to go anywhere, but at least you've claimed your handle, and don't freak out. Go wherever you feel most comfortable.
Yeah,
And
do the thing, pick one and do it well.
mhm. Oh
Because
my God, I just remembered you gave me the best advice about Twitter.
what was that?
I know. Look how great you are. Back in the day, I remember things got crazy and I wasn't really online very much. And you said to me, Jeannie, Twitter is just 10 minutes. If it happened more than 10 minutes ago, no one remembers it. On to the next thing. As soon as you jump back in, it's going to be like you never were not there.
Yep. They don't know. That algorithm
Oh,
moves so fast, nobody knows you're not there. You know how I learned that? I did a 6-week sabbatical and I was so proud of myself. And I came back and said, I'm back. And they were like, we didn't know you were gone. I was like, and I am not ever going to put any value on social media. The publishers put all this value on it. They force us to have it, and
mm,
it's now it's just entertainment. And I'm an artiste. I am not, I'm a writer, right? My job is not to create cool Canva
yeah.
stuff to post up or create neat reels and learn how to do all of that. That's not my job. My job is to write books that you love. And the rest of
Mm-hmm.
it can go hang, as far as I'm concerned.
So, question about the rest of it, because there is the business side. Okay. So, your job is to write these great books, which you do. So, now I just want to step into that business lane for a second. Like, well, you are published by big publishers, so they probably take care of the PR and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But like, you also have your own small press,
I do.
which I want to ask you, was that named after your kitty cats?
Yes. Yes. So it's Two Tails Press. So because I had twin kittens, and if you
Mm-hmm.
look very closely at my logo, there's a shadow ear. So there's two ears, and then there's a shadow ear, and that's for their fairy god cat who led me to them in a moment of need. She
Oh.
several years earlier, and I didn't want to not honor her spirit because she literally laid on my first 17 manuscripts. And I couldn't, not honor her somehow. So two tails, three tails didn't sound right. The case was wrong. So it was two tails with that lovely thing.
Oh,
But
that's so sweet.
Yeah, here's the problem with the small press. If I was only doing that and I was putting all my energy into it, yeah, I would really need to be focused on the social media. Um, I came along in social media a long time ago. Uh,
Hmm.
I was on MySpace and was doing okay there, and then Facebook started, and we had a private Facebook. It was when it was still the college network. We
Hmm.
had a private Facebook back in 2006. Um, and then it blew up in 2007. So it's changed so
Yeah.
much from what it was. And, the publishers are like, oh, you got to do this and you need to do this and you need to do this. And if you don't have a platform, I'll tell you how you get a platform. You write an excellent short story and get it published. You
Mm.
write a book that they can't ignore, and that gets you the platform. It doesn't matter if the book is good enough. It doesn't matter if you don't have 10,000 people on Instagram. It's just
Yeah.
the work has to be the important part of all of this. It just has to be.
Yeah. And I see so many authors spending so much money on PR themselves. Like they'll drop 20 grand on PR. And it's like, oh my gosh, you have to sell so many books to get that money back. And
And it's such a crapshoot. Even at my
yeah.
level, even with everything that we do, nobody can guarantee I'm going to get. I didn't get a PW review for a very bad thing. I got 6-starred PW reviews in a row, and they refused to review a very bad thing. I mean, there's no
Wow.
guarantee.
Yeah.
So it's craps, right? You're playing craps when you've got PR.
Yeah.
You're hoping that you're
Hmm.
gonna roll and it's gonna hit and you're gonna be like, woo, it's gonna be great. But the chances are there's so much noise out there, it's not gonna happen. The only way you can do that is having a book that is so outstanding that they can't not talk about it.
Yeah. That's that's always the goal.
And you take that
So,
energy of building a platform because it takes a lot. I mean, this is why my Joss Walker series, I have not even bothered with the social media, and that's it's not. I'm not worrying about that. Um, in fantasy, you probably do need more of a platform,
mm,
right?
mm,
But I just don't. I don't want to worry about that. I want to write the best books I can possibly write, or write the best scripts you can possibly write, and get attention that way.
so with your Two Tails Press, is that something that you solely use for your pen name books, or is that something, do you ever acquire another author's books for
I've
that?
not we've gone back and forth on that. We were at a point where we could expand and start acquiring, and I want to be a writer, not a publisher. So I
Mm-hmm.
do it for my backlist titles. I wrote a Taylor book,
Mm-hmm.
put it out through that. It was very successful. I was really pleased. So now that I know that I can do that, and
Yep.
I do the pen name. But that was a 6-book series, and the sixth book is sitting here, having been page proof that I need to finish this week, and then the series is done, and Joss Walker goes away for a little while. So
Maybe she'll, go to Italy and find a nice poison.
one never knows. I
You
never
never
rule
know.
it.
She'll take a little trip. And to stay on Josh for a second, your Josh, your pen name. Um, Haley's asking, how does that work with a pen name if you're well, I mean, you published it yourself, so you're not really signing a contract with yourself. But if someone were writing as a pen name being published by somebody else, by a different publisher, um, like are you signing contracts in the pen name? Is it important to you to keep your name separate?
You would be signing contracts in your legal name.
Mm-hmm.
And if you open the Joss Walker books, it's copyright JT Ellison.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the reason to do it is for the algorithms on Amazon and all the online, the also bots. When you look at something and they suggest another book, those are also bots. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that algorithm is very specific to, if you have fantasy books, you don't want to throw a thriller in there, because then the algorithm's like, do I show this to thriller readers or do I show it to fantasy readers? Which do I do? So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't show it to anybody. But if you're solely in the thriller genre, or you're solely in the fantasy genre, and all of the books that it's showing is to fantasy readers, and your ads that you're doing is on, you put ads using comps, your comp titles and everything, to drive all of that. You can actually drive all of that. I can go into, Joss and figure out whose books I would like to be recommended, you
Oh,
know. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a whole back end to self-publishing and indie publishing that is really fun. It's fun. I
crazy.
love it. I really love it. And that's why I
Do
always
you wish you started that a little earlier, or are you
I
fine with
started
how
it
it went?
back in 2000. I think 2009 is the first one I
Oh,
put out.
wow.
Yeah, because I had a bunch of short stories and I look at ew comp titles. Yeah, I know. We all hate that. But they're necessary. I started with short stories. And then I did a couple of anthologies where, I had a really cool idea and I just
Yep.
brought some friends in and, they wrote stories for me and I published those. And, I had a really cool assistant who knew a lot about publishing, so I was kind of creating work for her. So I ended up with a bunch of stuff published there. But I love knowing the back end. I think you always need to have a plan B. Publishing is a very fickle beast.
Mm,
It doesn't hurt to know how the sausage is made. Doesn't mean you have to make the sausage, but it doesn't hurt to
yeah.
know how it's made.
Yeah. We have a self-publishing symposium. I'll link to it in the show notes. And but it was just fascinating just to see the process of, because it's the process of,
It's the
publishing a
same,
book.
yeah,
And
if you're doing it, if you're doing it the way I'm doing it. I mean,
hmm
Two Tales is an indie press. It's not that I'm just putting a manuscript up on KDP. I mean, I'm actually
right.
distributing through Ingram to all, I used to distribute through Baker and Taylor for a while. I'm trying to get my books in the libraries. I'm doing, sales calls and all of that. It is an indie press, but it's an awful lot of work. And I just decided, you know what, it's great to know how the sausage is made, but I want to go right and let somebody else make my sausage.
hmm It's like it DoorDash.
I just want to take my sausage out of the refrigerator and throw it in a pan.
Yeah, I
I
hear
don't
you.
need I don't need anything more than that right now.
But it's also kind of good. Well, although if you really knew how the sausage, let's not get into a hot dog conversation. Oh, okay, so somebody's asking about JT, about going by JT. Like, did you do that to avoid some sort of gender bias? I mean, they're trying to decide whether to use their name versus initials for that
So,
reason.
so it's a really good question, and I well predate a lot of this. I was called JT my whole life, and
Hmm
all this sausage talk. Yeah. Sorry. It's a thing. It's what girls do when they get together and talk. It's about the sausage. I'm kidding. Oh my God. I am
And
punchy.
we're
I
not even drinking wine.
I know. I'm drinking mint tea. That's really sad.
I have
Um,
I have water.
I've got water too. So the whole thing with that, my real name is very long and very awkwardly spelled, and nobody calls me by it except for my mother and my husband when he's pissed off.
Yeah, no.
So all I can imagine was the multitudes of ways it was going to be misspelled on
Hmm
covers, on out in marketing copy and all of that. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to write under that name. My agent said, what about JT? And I'm like, well, that's what everybody has called me my whole life, so that would be great. Um, it creates it creates a barrier in a way. Uh, if something bad happens, if I got a terrible review, oh, poor JT got a really bad review. And I can step away from that. And I used to be able to like keep myself away from the work.
Mm,
That's stopped happening once you start touring and once, you're actually out there in the world, it's kind of hard to not to separate your art from your personal life. But yeah, I like having that little bit of barrier to entry for just random
mm.
people, nobody knows my name, which I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, that is nice. That is really lovely. You talked about doing short stories, and also when you collaborated with Catherine on that whole series, as screenwriters, we're used to collaborating with each other. Like there's a whole thing, but like a lot of authors are used to just being by themselves. They're the master of their story. Like, how was that collaboration process for you? And was it, what did you learn from it that actually helped you then become a better singular writer
Right.
again.
Two heads are better than one.
Hmm.
Right? There's always a moment in the story where I've hit a wall and I have to reach out to a writer friend and say, hey, this is where I'm at. Or I have to sit down with my husband over dinner and say, let me just run this by you. Here's the problem I'm having.
He's good at that though.
He's the plot whisperer.
Yeah, he is. He's really good at that.
Sometimes it's just a simple, once I say it out loud, it's like, oh, I've got it. And sometimes you really just are stuck and you need somebody to step in and give you a little bit of advice. With Catherine, so you and I did a little bit of a collaboration at one point.
Yes.
I was absolutely astounded how an idea became a completely different story.
Mm.
That and
Well,
the
I
script.
think we went a little darker than you wanted to go, but
No,
that's
it
okay.
wasn't. You went lighter than I wanted to go,
Oh,
actually.
okay,
It's
good.
actually a little lighter. It's just it's interesting. It's interesting to me how that kind of the script writing collaboration and the co-writing collaboration is different.
Hmm.
Right? You're looking at all the ways to make a script into the best movie it can be, right? It
Hmm.
needs to have, or TV show, it has to have very specific beats that are, kind of inviolate. You have to have all of these things. When you're working with another author, and everybody does it differently. So
Hmm.
some people, one person writes a chapter and then another person writes a chapter and you do it like that. Some people take a character and they write that character story and that one writes that character story. Catherine and I were different. We sat down, we outlined the book. Neither of us were outliners, which was a challenge. We would outline the book, and then I would come back to Nashville. I would go out to California. We would outline the book. I'd come back to Nashville. I would write the book, and then I would give it to her. Now, halfway, I would always, instead of going to a friend or going to my husband, I would go to her and be like,
Hmm.
here's where we are in the story. This is the problem I'm having. And the two of us would start going. And I mean, we would literally just be writing together. She would be saying,
Hmm.
I would be writing it down and I would be saying things. And, there's so much, we're so mixed in that book. I don't know who wrote
Hmm. Yeah.
because there were some points we were literally just live writing together, which was really fun. So it's different when I'm sitting alone now. I'm like, man, I could use another brain on this. You know, what am I missing here? I'm missing something, and I know that, somebody else is going to have a better answer for me.
That's what I love about, like, I always feel like there should be like a brainstorm writer for hire, like somebody who
Oh,
you just like bounce ideas off of, like like screenwriter Matt. Like I used to bounce ideas off of
yeah,
him and stuff. Like it's I say screenwriter Matt because I also have a boss named Matt, and that's how we
yeah, yeah, we got
define the difference between them in my household. So but it's so wonderful because there's no that person has no ownership over the work, but you need somebody to just bounce ideas or somebody to just call you out when they say, you're playing it too safe here, like
yeah.
go deeper, like this is I'm bored, or I don't like this character now, like you've kind of lost me. um
I have
that
a
I think it's really great.
I have a friend that, is like the 30% in friend,
Mm,
and I have it's probably 75,000, 80,000 words where I've lost the plot entirely. And I would rather jump off a bridge than finish the book. It's so terrible. It's so awful. It makes no sense. And that there is a person that I always call at that point. And she'll hear the phone ring and she'll be like, you're at 75,000 words, aren't you? She'll pick it up. You're at 75,000 words. Because we only text or see each other in person. I never call. We never call each other unless it's like, a problem. And it's so funny how she always knows. And it's like I'll just explain what's going on and she'll say something. I'll be like, oh my God. And then I have to go blow up the book. So
yeah.
happens every book, every book.
Yes. I want
That way
to
you live wrong.
I want to ask you about something that I happen to writing a personal story. When
Mm,
you wrote, yes, when when you wrote It's One of Us,
mhm.
and you messaged me and sent me a link to the arc, and that was, I can't imagine how hard that was for you to write. But you took something personal that happened to you and a painful thing that happened to you and turned it into this mystery thriller, you know. Um, I Can you speak a little bit about that? Because there's a lot of people who say, like, write what you know, and then sometimes people don't have anything interesting that's really going on in their lives, but sometimes people do, and sometimes revisiting those traumatic things or whatever is very difficult. But those are the things that are heart, and they really, you bleed on the page. So if could you speak a little bit about tackling a project like that for anybody out there who's thinking about writing something deeply personal?
Ugh, it's hard. I mean, and I won't even dance around it. So the book is about infertility, and it's very much the journey my husband and I were on. And when you and I were talking, this was the same story. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same base story of my husband and I's journey through infertility. And spoiler, it didn't work. We don't have kids. And second spoiler, we survived.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I've always wanted to write the book. It took me 10 years from the time that you and I were kind of talking about it, and we went at it from a completely different angle.
Mm-hmm.
It took 10 years. And I would take that out. I would take that treatment out and I would look at it and I would take the notes out and I would look at it and I would, nothing ever clicked with me for
Mm-hmm.
that until I had this crazy, I'm a really visual person.
Mm-hmm.
And I had somebody just, I was sitting here one day and this woman popped into my head and she was walking down a beach and she had her arms around herself. She was wearing chinos that were rolled up. She had dark hair. She was so incredibly sad. And I didn't know what was wrong with her and I wanted to know. And I started asking her in my mind, what is wrong with you? What has happened to you? And I realized she had just had a miscarriage. And I went, oh my God, I've been going at this story from the men's point of view, from the
Mm-hmm.
father's point of view. For 10 years, I've been trying to tell the story through his lens. I have to tell it through her lens. And literally, I mean, it was like lightning clapped. It was amazing. God, I love those moments. It's just what
That
makes,
first chapter, I was like, oh my God. I think
yeah,
I actually just found
how to write about a body. Friend of mine, I can't believe I just snorted. A friend of mine, so I'm laughing so hard, was introducing me to a new person. And she's like, you've got to read this book. She wrote about a rotting body in the most beautiful way it was just and I'm just like, not the lead. Maybe not the lead. Maybe that's because they're looking at me like rotting bodies. Yeah, the opening chapter is a woman decomposing in a lake. And it is possibly the best work I've ever done.
Yeah,
I just know it.
so
True
good.
story. Don't tell anybody this. True story to the
Shh,
200 of my
everyone.
closest friends who are on here. My editor wanted me to cut that.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
And it
So
just
how do
makes
you
the entire book. Again, the prologue. It's a prologue that's a frame that sets all of it.
so advocating for yourself, like what do you wish you knew before you started about advocating for yourself?
Okay, that's an excellent question because I had another experience where an editor wanted to change the ending of a book. And I disagreed completely. But it was the first book with a new publisher. It was my first hardcover deal. It was a big deal. She was a big name editor, and she really, really, really just kept hammering me about it. And so I gave in and I changed the ending, and it ruined the book. And the book had everything. I mean, it was a book of the month club. It was all of this, and everybody liked it.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't the right ending. And so when the paperback was coming out, my editor had left at that point. I had a different editor and I said, "Hey, can I put the paperback out with the original ending?" And they said yes.
Because
And
it also makes it so a new way to sell it.
right. And it did. And there's an author's note that this is the original ending. The hardcover has the different a different ending.
Mm-hmm.
invariably somebody reads that book and sends me a note. It's like, I can't see another ending. What would this was the, and I'm like, I know. So I
Go
didn't
buy the hardcover and find
go
out
buy
how
the
it
hardcover and compare them and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about.
is.
It left things very amorphously, up in the air instead of having a nice, tight, ooh, it's really cool. Um, and so that I've always regretted not just saying, no, this is my book and this is how it's going to end. And I know in my heart and soul, this is how it's supposed to end. Um, because the paperback did way better than the hardcover. You know, the reviews were just like, so I will never again, if my gut tells me this isn't the right idea, I will never, ever do that.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And definitely hard for, early writers to
Oh,
fight for because you just want that publishing deal,
well, and sometimes you're
it's
wrong. Sometimes your gut is wrong.
yeah,
I've got
right.
another friend, I'll tell a quick story. Another friend who had sections of her book that I mean, they fought for 6 months about these sections of the book, and they finally said, listen, they're not going to be in. They took it out. It's been on the bestseller list for months.
Oh,
So sometimes they do know what they're
yeah. Yes, and I think taking notes is a whole other conversation. I mean, we've had that conversation at Symposium before,
Oh,
but like,
yeah.
mostly from a screenwriting perspective, but would love to have that conversation with authors and agents and
It's
maybe like a
hard.
panel, because it's
That's a
also
good
hard to
idea.
give notes for people who don't want to hear them.
Yeah, it really is. It is. I have a hard time, I think everybody does. It's like, what are you
Hmm.
talking about? What are you doing?
Or
No,
when you're just so tired of writing it that it's like, I don't want to go back.
I don't want to go back and do it again. But I think you can overnote something. I think there
Yeah.
can be suggestions that can make something stronger. And I think there are suggestions that it's just suggestions to make suggestions. And the next,
Hmm.
oh, you are so deep in the weeds and the story doesn't resemble what you started with.
That's called Hollywood.
I am aware. I am aware of how that works.
And then you
I
always just
really would
smile
like
and say,
to,
oh, that's really interesting.
one of these days, I need to learn how to write a screenplay. I need to learn how to adapt my own book so that
Well,
I
let's meet in New York and we'll have a
and we'll
weekend
do that.
together
We'll have a
and we'll
weekend
do
and
that.
you'll teach me how to be a screenwriter.
Absolutely. I wanted Paula ask a question, backtracking a bit. She said, you mentioned that you're a couple decades into writing. At what point did you feel you were truly a success and perhaps actually knew you could make a living at this?
Mm. I've been a full-time writer from the first contract. It was a 3-book contract and it was enough to pay the rent, which was incredible. The success part of it, I mean, obviously, success is being able to pay the rent, pay the cat's food,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. Um, I don't measure success by that. I don't measure success by lists. I don't measure success by reviews. I don't measure success by stars. They do, cats do cost. Oh my God. Um,
So do
I
dogs.
I measure success by finishing. The
Mm,
more I finish, that to me, I'm like, because if you finish, then you can have a sale and words equal money. And I've always looked at writing as words equal money. And it's a little, I mean, it's not the romantic author in a garret trying to, pour their life onto the page. It is absolutely mercenary, I guess. But I think you can make money with your art. I know Elizabeth Gilbert says, don't use your art to pay the rent. And I'm like, what are you supposed to use it for? You know, of course you want your art to pay the rent. That's the goal, right? And that's, but if you finish, the more you finish,
hmm.
if you finish 3 books in a year, that means you're going to be able to sell 3 books in a year, and that triples your income for the year.
Hmm.
If you sell a short story, if you sell 15 short stories in a year
Hmm.
versus one, I mean, it's just truly, and that takes that kind of takes the pressure off of the accolades and the ego and all of those things. If you can focus 100%, I'm going to write the best book I can possibly write at this moment. You can only, my goal is to make it to the World Series with every book, right? I want
Mm-hmm.
to make it to the World Series. Some years I'm going to be the wild card and I'm not going to make it in. Some years I'm going to make it to the ALC championship. Okay, cool. And some years I'm going to make it to the World Series. And
Mm-hmm.
like 3 times in my career, I've won the World Series. So, I mean, baseball metaphors aside, I really think that that's what your goal should be, is trying to finish and knowing that you've written the best book that you're capable of writing at that time. That is what I focus on. And if I have, then those other fun little accolades start lining up.
Mm. What's the hardest part for you? Like, is it starting? Is it, I know you already mentioned that you don't outline and that you had to outline with Catherine, but is it finishing? Is it the middle slog of the book? Like, what's the hardest, or even is it just like
It's that
the
75, 80,000 word mark where I'm
Mhm.
like, I have no idea what I'm doing. What have I done? I have one book that I had to do that 7 times, that I got to that point and I'm like, this isn't the story. And I literally had to go back and start over.
Have you
Um,
ever just fully abandoned a book
no, and
that you're writing?
that was the one I was getting really close to abandoning. And then I've never done it before in my life. I sent it to my editor unfinished and said, I don't know what to do here. And the minute you do that, you figure it out. And
Mhm.
the minute you put up the red flag and you're like, I need help, please help me, then it all just clicks. So, it's just that's just life in general. I
Maybe just write that email to the editor and just
write
leave
the
it as a
email.
draft.
Don't send it, just write it and sit on it. Yeah, that book, that was Her Dark Lies. It was a Rebecca retelling. But what if Rebecca hadn't died? What if Rebecca wasn't really dead? Was the premise. And to do an homage, not to do a retelling, but to do an homage, I really struggled with that because it was somebody else's original idea that I was
Mm,
manipulating into my own story. And I'll
hmm.
never do that again. I'll never do
Yeah.
that because the constriction on the story of these are the beats that you have to follow, that was really hard. It was really,
Yeah. Do you ever work on more than one book at a time?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, or short stories and books. I'll write a short story,
Mm-hmm.
and I usually am juggling. I just finished the copy edits for my book that's coming out in September, and then immediately did the copy edit for the last Joss book, and now I'm going to do the proof of the Joss book Friday and my page proofs for the next book's coming on Monday. So, there's a lot of interweaving, but if I get a story idea, I will certainly work on it. I was working on my own books when I was writing with
Mm-hmm.
Catherine and all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I want to wrap up but I've got one more question to ask you. But before I ask you this question, I want to give you the opportunity to give a little tease about Last Scene, which is your next book coming out in September. It's only February now, but mark your calendars, people.
It's coming in September. Do you want the pitch of that?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
book, so that book is it is a very dark insular story. The past couple of books I've done have been big, huge 8-person point of view stories. This one has only got one real point of view, and it's got a monster point of view, which is really great.
Mm,
But it is the story of a woman who the world is just ending for her. Everything about her is she's lost her job, she's getting divorced, everything is going wrong. Everything that she thought she was going to have in her 30s is not happening. And then her father calls and says, I've fallen and need, I can't get up. I've fallen, I need surgery. Can you please, and she's like, perfect timing. She goes home to help him get his broken leg back together and finds in his paperwork an article from Nashville that her mother, who she thought died in a car crash, and that's what they've told her her whole life, was actually murdered.
mm. Wow.
And I almost said the rest of it, and I'm not going to
Don't
because
yeah, that's enough that should tease people
yeah,
because but that's great. That one I'm looking forward to, September 2025.
yep.
Um, and we're going to put links to all of JT's stuff because she also has some really wonderful resources for writers on her site. Um,
Spe- you know,
definitely go. Yeah.
Speaking of that, I have been live writing that book. I've been live
Oh,
writing it
wow.
on Substack. on a series called 22 Steps. And it is, it's a paid series, but I figure after 20 years, I've earned the right to ask for people to pay
Yes.
for a little bit of knowledge. But it is, I literally have done every step of the book from concept to right now we're on step 14, the copy edit. And the next is step 15, the
Oh,
page.
wonderful.
But I learned how to outline so I could explain how my brain works. So everything
Mm-hmm.
that I've done is this is how I do it. Here are some ideas how you can do it. But it's running through, if you're interested in how publishing works and how the stages of publishing works,
Mm-hmm.
it's my Substack's called The Creative Edge, and it's my 22 step series.
And we will put a link to that in the recording email. And I'll also update your post bio on the Symposium site to include, because we have a spot where you can put a Substack link.
Oh,
We've got all the links there.
you
So
got all the links.
I'll make sure I get all your links and put them in there. It's awesome. But I want to ask you one last question. Is there something that you haven't done yet in your career as a writer that you really are like dying to try?
I do want to adapt something. I
Yeah.
would love to learn how to do screenwriting. I've got Final Draft. I've looked at it a couple times. I'm just like, blah. Kind of like with you at Scrivener. I'm just like, blah. That's a lot.
Yes. Oh,
But
it's Final Draft is much easier than Scrivener.
well, screenwriting is a completely different,
It is. It's a very different
right?
skill set.
It's all tell instead of show. And I'm a very showy writer. I'm a very visual
Mm-hmm.
writer. I love the, you know, I love the words, right? So learning how to distill the story. I started Good Girls Lie. I actually started as a screenplay. And the prologue of that book was the screenplay that I wrote for it. And yeah, I thought it was really effective. And so I use that trick actually now. I try to envision this is a thing. I'd like to do that. Um, I, you know, I want to write a rom-com. I got a lot of romance
Mm-hmm.
ideas. I
Yes.
want to write an
All
epic.
those honeymoons.
All those honeymoons, right? I've been happily married for a very long time. There's just so many things. I mean, again, I saw somebody make a comment earlier. It popped up that you didn't have time because you were 61, and I say nonsense. Of course you have time. And
I'm 61, kids.
yeah, you know, of course you have
Yeah.
time. You
You have
always
time.
but it's, you know, I think when you want to challenge yourself, that is always a good thing. And it's how you grow and it's how you level up. And that is definitely something to work towards. So
Mm-hmm. We also have somebody who regularly comes to our symposiums who's in his 80s.
good.
And yeah, love it. Love him.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, creativity doesn't die because you've gotten a little older. I mean, oh my God.
no, and I would
If
actually
anything, I'm more
argue,
creative now than I was when I was younger because
yes.
I have a better sense of how to tell a story and
And
more things have happened to me to share.
I think as you get older, you have less shifts to give. Like you are willing to just put it out there. Like I
Sure.
don't care what people think of me anymore. I don't care if you like me, if you don't like me. I really don't care. This is what the story I want to tell. This is, and I also you have life experience. You know,
Right.
I couldn't write the same thing at 19 or 25 that I
Oh,
can
no,
write
because you don't
now.
know what you don't know at that point, right? I still don't
Oh,
know.
Jeff's 86 in May. Giddy
Well,
up.
giddy up, happy birthday. My dad's 90 and is still playing golf 3 times a week, so
My mother is turning 93 and she still has a tax business.
nice.
I mean, you can
If
do
you have the
whatever you
thing that you
anything.
love,
Yeah,
yeah.
anything you want. Well, JT, this was so lovely. And
Thank you for
I'm really
having me. It's been fun.
thank you
I
so
wish I
much
could
for
have seen
joining
more of
us.
the chat. I've seen a couple things pop up. You guys seem
Oh,
like you're a blast.
when we get the recording, it gives me a list of the chat and I'll send it to you
Great. Well,
so you
if
can
there's
catch up.
anything that y'all need or want or I didn't answer that you're interested about, just reach out.
She's very accessible.
On Substack.
On
I'm
Substack,
not paying attention to the other social medias right now. I'm taking a big old break.
which I think we should all do. Maybe just everyone take the next week off.
Yes, it will do amazing things for your brain.
Thank you, JT.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for coming.